Though Robert risked all our lives to win it, the Iron Throne bored him. He cared little for justice, and less for rule. If it weren't women or wineskin, he had no use for it. If it hadn't been for the stalwart Jon Arryn serving as his hand, I suspect the challenge to Robert's crown would have come sooner than it did. The Iron Islands have never lacked for treachery. They respect only strength, and honour is as foreign to them as the Seven. After 6 years, their ruler, Lord Balon Greyjoy, wagered that Robert had not won the support of the great houses of Westeros. Many of them still named him usurper. Lord Balon declared the Iron Islands independent, and sent his Iron Fleet to Lannisport. Lord Tywin was careless, and the Ironborn burnt his ships at anchor. Lord Balon and his reavers controlled the Sunset Sea. Robert then ordered me to succeed where his father-in-law, Lord Tywin, had failed. But beneath Robert's fury, I sensed relief. War he could understand. He would smash Lord Balon as he had Rhaegar. I raised Robert's fleet and sailed around Westeros to the Iron Islands. I set a trap for the Iron Fleet off Fair Isle. As sailors and warriors, the Ironborn are unparalleled. They are not soldiers. They have no discipline, no strategy, no unity. In a battle, each man fights only for his own glory, and their longships are built for lightning strikes and shore raids. When the captains rushed in, I smashed their longships with our larger war galleys. The strength of the Ironborn is in their ships. With the Iron Fleet broken, I had assured Robert's victory. He could now transport troops and siege weapons to invade the Iron Islands. And contrary to Lord Balon's beliefs, Robert had plenty of both. I couldn't believe the friendships Robert could inspire in war. The Lords of the Reach had fought against him during his rebellion, and they still named him usurper years after, though never to his face. During this rebellion, they were drinking and laughing like they were the greatest of friends. By rebelling against the Iron Throne, Lord Balon did more to unite the Seven Kingdoms than Robert ever could. When Robert came to the Iron Islands, he brought with him the full power of Westeros. Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard led the assault on Aldwyck, while I subdued Great Wyck, the largest of the Iron Islands. But Robert saved the seat of House Greyjoy, Pike, for himself and Lord Eddard. Robert would boast of the battle's bloodiness, and how he could have torn the island into the waves if Lord Balon had not bent the knee. But if I had led the assault, Lord Balon's neck would have bent under a sword. Because I do not forget, I do not pardon. His time will come. All their times will come. My brother, Robert Baratheon, had raised the banners of Storm's End, our ancestral castle, against the Mad King Aerys. Jon Arryn of the Vale and Eddard Stark of the North stood with him, and Hoster Tully of the Riverlands would join. But their lands were far from ours, and separated by the combined strength of the West, the Reach, and King's Landing itself. Even Robert's own bannermen were against him. It was the hardest choice I ever had to make. My brother or my king. Blood or honour. Eris ruled by right of all the laws in Westeros. Everyone knew the price of defiance. But there are deeper, older laws. The younger brother bows before the elder. I followed Robert. Early in the war, Mace Tyrell's indecisive victory at Ashford cut Robert off from Storm's End. Instead of pursuing Robert and risking his record, Mace Tyrell turned east and laid siege to our home. His vast army and navy encircled us, preventing any resupply by land or sea. If a wagon tried to reach us, it was burned. If a ship tried to land, it was sunk. We were locked inside Storm's End to starve. But Robert had commanded me to hold the castle no matter the cost. He could ill afford to lose his ancient seat, which had never fallen. While Robert smashed Rhaegar at the Trident, my men ate the dogs, because the horses had already been devoured. While the Lannisters sacked King's Landing, we ate the rats. If the smuggler, Davos, had not slipped through the Tyrell blockade with his onions, we'd have eaten our own dead. But I held the castle until Lord Eddard remembered us and marched to lift the siege. The Tyrells didn't even put up a fight. And Robert threw a feast to celebrate Lord Eddard's victory. I was sent to the Royal Island stronghold of Dragonstone to deal with Viserys and Daenerys, the last surviving Targaryen children. Before I arrived, however, they had escaped across the narrow sea. Robert was furious. He stripped me of Storm's End and gave it to that prancing fool Renly, my younger brother. I could keep Dragonstone. Now Robert is dead, and a bastard pretender soils my throne, while the realm fills with schemers and traitors. But the rightful king is coming for them all, and I will not stop until I have scoured the land clean of abomination. The Baratheons say, ours is the fury. I will show them. Fury burns. Nobody knows why the Targaryens first came to the island of Dragonstone. Old Valyria was at the height of its power, in the center of the civilized world, which ended at the narrow sea. Westeros was a filthy backwater with 7 kings squabbling over borders and minor glories. So much for progress. The island itself was and is nothing. It had no gold or gems to lure Valyrian nobility. All it has is rock. Mostly a shiny black stone too brittle for war and too sharp for building. The Targaryens call it dragon glass. I call it useless. But the Targaryens managed to build a castle here. Simpletons claim they used ancient Valyrian sorcery, forgetting that the Targaryens brought a small army with them from Essos. There is no magic in strong backs, though admittedly, the castle is unlike anything in Westeros. Foreign and strange. If the Targaryens ever regretted their barren outpost and longed for the comforts of home, the doom made their folly permanent. Valyria collapsed into the waves and was no more. To look east was to see the ruin of their homeland, the greatest civilization before or since. But to look west, as Aegon realized, was to see a fertile land, ripe for conquest, perhaps a new Valyria. Though good for little else, Dragonstone proved the perfect staging point for Aegon's invasion of Westeros. The Blackwater Bay gained easy access to the continent. The lands that were disputed by three kingdoms, the Reach, the Iron Islands, and the Stormlands. But their capitals were far enough away that none of them could mount a force before Aegon got a foothold. Even if their kings had been able to stop bickering over whose problem it was. Then it was too late. Aegon had chosen his first camp well, with the bay to the east, the river to the south, and open fields to the north and west. His army was impossible to take by surprise. A perfect site for an invasion, and one day, his capital, King's Landing. The Doom had taught the Targaryens the prudence of refuge. After the conquest, Dragonstone became the seat of the Crown Prince, and heir to the Iron Throne. It would serve them well, and me ill. 300 years later, after my brother, Robert Baratheon, rebelled against the Iron Throne, and the Lannisters slaughtered the Mad King Aerys and his royal family. Robert dispatched me to deal with the last surviving Targaryen children. But before I arrived, a loyal knight had smuggled them across the narrow sea to safety. Hatred for the Targaryens blinded Robert. Unjustly, I was blamed, and stripped of our family's castle of Storm's End, and given Dragonstone in its stead. Over the years, whenever I demanded my rights restored, Robert would remind me of the island's royal pedigree and pretend he was doing me honor, as if I were one of his tavern girls to be so easily deceived and dismissed. But Robert is dead, and I, Stannis Baratheon, am the rightful king of Westeros. Let the usurpers and traitors sit on the Iron Throne. From Dragonstone, I will be the dagger at their throat.